Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Tuesday morning, February 1st, and I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and chat room's open, and I did pop the link in there to what we were talking about yesterday and all last week, actually. And that's the effects of child physical abuse on children, and that's what we're talking about, mainly talking about my story and really bringing out, to light what it did to me as a survivor of child abuse. It's graphic and it's uncomfortable for a lot of people to listen to. So make sure that you're in a comfortable place to listen to this. I say this on every show. I'm not a counselor or therapist, and I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows, mainly because I want to bring out, as much information as I can to the public about child abuse, and just want to be another voice out here speaking out against it, standing up for child rights, and to be another voice for survivors out here, right? So, you have to listen at your own discretion, because I'm talking about all the topics of abuse, and it's very sensitive material, and I don't sugarcoat it and don't minimize it, and I really just tell it like it is. And so you have to be careful what you're listening to. So if you think the show might bother you, it is truly your discretion. You have to make that decision for yourself and, know what's good for you to listen to, right? So if it's clearly your discretion, right? And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone, okay it, that you can listen to my shows, because there's a lot of adult content on my shows, and I just protecting children at all times. You certainly deserve it. You have the right to be protected, and a lot of kids don't know that. And so, you have rights, and you have to be careful what you're doing online, and you have to be very careful what you're doing in chat rooms and whatnot, because there's a lot of child sexual predators and pedophiles out there who will do anything to get a hold of a child. And they're, if you check out the FBI's website, FBI.gov, you can see, they have some good information on how to keep yourself safe while you're on the internet for young people as well as for parents, right? And they also talk about the issues of child sexual predators and online predators and pedophiles who are looking to get a hold of children online, and they bring to light really just how serious of an issue this really is. You don't want to be a victim of a child sexual predator or pedophile, so you need to keep yourself safe. And so if you're a young person under the age of 18, you have permission to listen to my shows, ask an adult to listen with you, and make sure that, someone in your family, hopefully, who cares about you, like a parent or caregiver or a teacher or coach, somebody, listen to the show with you, and then, make sure it's age appropriate for you, and that it should be, that you should be listening to, right? So thanks, everybody. I appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody who's tuning in and following along here on my journey, and all of my shows. I do so many shows, right? So I do appreciate people who have been listening. I've almost got 21,000 people who have listened to shows. I've done probably about 550 shows, but somewhere in there. But I had no idea November 2009 how many shows I'd be doing. And so I do appreciate everybody who's tuning in and catching my shows. Thank you very much for your support. And we're going to get right back into where we left off yesterday, talking about the whole emotional impact of child physical abuse. Child physical abuse is huge. It's a problem, and all abuse is an issue because it not only affects the child, in one way, it'll affect the child in many ways. So, children who've been physically abused or sexually abused or neglected, physically neglected, will also, on top of that, experience all kinds of emotional issues and problems and psychological problems because of that. Because along with physical abuse, child sexual abuse, and physical neglect and whatnot, comes the emotional damage, the psychological damage done. It's not just one thing. It's a myriad of problems, and, it causes a lot of serious problems for children, right? So that's what we were kind of talking about last week, and mainly just bringing out, stuff that I went through. And it's pretty graphic, so you have to, be aware of that, right? I'm talking about a lot of graphic stuff, especially last week on my shows, right? But this particular article is from healthyplace.com, www.healthyplace.com, and it's just an article called "How Does Physical Abuse Impact a Child?" Right? And we've been going through this article now for a while. It's just a short little article, but I've sort of been expounding upon it and talking about my own story. The impact of actual physical abuse, then the emotional impact of physical abuse, which is where we left off yesterday, and just talking about children who have been physically abused compared with non-abused children may have more difficulty with academic performance, self-control, self-image, and social relationships. And they said that children who are physically abused have a predisposition to a host of emotional disturbances. They may, not all children, not every child. This is generally just the studies done and what they find, in the groups, that they do study. Right, there are significant numbers of those children who have been abused who experience this stuff. Not every child who was abused would experience every single thing, and that's why it's important to realize that. It depends on the severity of the abuse. It depends on how long the abuse happened and it continued on, and whether the child got any help, and whether there was anybody in the home that was a positive influence on the child. There's many things that can kind of come into play there. But children who don't get any help, there's no one around to support them, and they just grow up being abused, really face the worst consequences because there's no one there to help them. There's no one there to buffer that and to try to help the child, right? So it's horrible. And they said that they may experience feelings of low self-esteem and depression. They may be hyperactive and overly anxious. So many of these children may exhibit behavioral problems such as aggression towards other children or siblings. And other emotional problems include anger, hostility, fear, humiliation, and an inability to express feelings, right? And that's kind of what I've been talking about on my shows here in One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, really the whole way through in the morning. It's just the whole issues that I had to deal with about dealing with my own anger, my own hostility, my own fear, my own humiliation, right? The whole shame-rage connection, which I really didn't know a whole lot about until I did the work on it and really went through the material and could see what had happened and why I was feeling the way that I was. I really had no idea it was a shame-rage thing. I knew I was raging, but I didn't know it was caused by shame, and that's quite interesting. We did a whole week's worth of stuff on that pretty much last fall. I believe I was working on that. And, it's harsh. It's so incredibly harsh on kids who've been through this, right? Then you grow up, if you aren't killed by your parents or caregivers or whoever's abusing you, and you have a whole mess to clean up because nobody else can do it for you. I kept thinking somebody else would be able to take away my pain and make things right in my life, and I actually, until I realized it was going to have to be me to do it, I was sitting around on the couch at the age of 41, considering killing myself again, planning my suicides, and same old rut, the same old depression, the same old anger, and this manifesting, right? I'd just be raging mad because that inner child of mine could never get justice. There was no help for her. That little girl from so long ago who was wounded, right? And I was just having a hard time figuring out how I was going to, make it, without continuing on in this spiraling in this pool of depression and just being extremely angry at what happened to me as a child, right? So anger is a huge issue, right? It's absolutely huge. And we spent weeks, actually, if not a whole month, on the whole issue of anger and what it is, and that anger is necessary and it's normal, but it's the perversions of anger that are a problem. And so there's all kinds of issues that we have to learn to deal with, as adult survivors in order to live a healthy life, a functioning, healthy life, right? Because we weren't taught how to do that as a child. Like, especially if you grow up in a home that's just so dysfunctional and so abusive that the norm is abuse. The norm is dysfunction. And everybody's doing quite well in the dysfunction. And that was our case, right? I mean, our family was dysfunctional from the day before I was born. It was dysfunctional, I believe, from the day my parents got married. And they created this life for their family, right? That was just because they were both having so many mental issues. They had so many problems themselves. They just created this world that did not fit in with really the regular world. Because my dad was schizophrenic, my mom was manic depressive. They were both abused as children. They had this horrible marriage, and they brought us up in this certain atmosphere, really, that was so different than most people that I knew, and even the other children that I knew who had been abused in their lifetimes, and young people, their home lives didn't seem to be so twisted as ours, because there had been usually one parent who was actually the one who was trying to help the kids, or the one who was trying to make a good home for their children, and they had some normalcy. Whereas in my family, the more not normal you were, the better off. The more you'd get along in that home, right? So my brothers were doing drugs, a lot of drugs, and they would be doing drugs right in the house, and they would be, stealing the stuff out of the house to go buy their drugs, right? And my parents just let it all happen, right? I mean, if they were abusing all of us for no reason, so it's not like they needed a reason to lash out at us physically, right? My brothers knew that. And so, my brother was being beaten just for having his legs over the side of the chair. So, and then he could go out and do all kinds of drugs, and nobody would say anything. That was the norm in our house, right? I could come in the room with a look on my face and be beaten, but I could also be busted with drugs, and my mom would find some of my drugs or whatever, and I wouldn't receive a beating for that, right? So, the consequences and the lifestyle that our parents let us all live in this mess was all inappropriate and very much damaging. You know what I mean? Because we could do. My brothers actually figured that they could just do whatever they wanted then. They could just do drugs, they could hurt the family, they could threaten to kill my sister, they could rip off from us. My brother sexually abused me, and they got away with it. They were allowed to do it. And yet, if we happened to be sitting, in the living room and one of our parents walked by and just was in a bad, foul mood, then we'd catch a beating. See? So there was no proper there was no proper behavioral set. There was no proper boundary set. There was no normalcy, right? So I grew up in this bizarre home, right? And having to make sense of everything, it was just absolutely crazy. And especially trying to get through my my teen years, like my early teens, like where you really start to develop into your person, into who you are. Like 12, 13, 14 years old. I mean, I knew there was our home was not normal, right, compared to what most people were experiencing, and a lot of people were experiencing that I knew, and and yet, what are you going to do about it? You know what I mean? It's like there wasn't much I could do about it, and it's incredibly hard on kids, right? It just messes them up. They talk about hostility, right? I had a lot of hostility, and I mean, I don't know, I don't have hostility now as an adult, right? But I did as a young person. It was really easy for me to fly off the handle and hit somebody, just a young person, a peer, my age, right? If I didn't like something they were doing, or threaten them with violence, right? Threatening with violence, that was just my thing to do because that's what my parents were always doing to me, and so I would always threaten other kids with violence. Like my mom would be like, my mom was serious about it though, whereas I was actually just mouthing off. But my mom was constantly threatening violence, and so was my dad. And so I would do the same thing to other kids, like that I knew and hung around with, and would run into. And so I was kind of looked at as a bully. I wasn't necessarily going around beating up kids, but if a kid did something to me that I didn't like, then I had no problem chasing them down and beating them up, because that's what my mom did to me. My mom used to chase me down and beat me up. So actually I learned to quit running actually after a while, but because she could always catch me, right? It was really sad. She was very, very sick and ill, but she could still catch me. I just kind of learned to stop running because I knew it was inevitable. I was going to catch a beating, whether I caught it then or caught it later, right? So, but when I was really little, just out of fear, I'd just bolt, right? And that's kind of what I did to other kids. They would run, they'd see me, and if they did something to me and they'd see me coming, man, they would run, and I would catch them and I would beat them up. And I was just doing what I was taught how to do, right? So I was kind of hostile as a child and a bit of a bully. But I also was sticking up for people and kids that I thought needed to be sticked up for. Like if I had a friend who was being picked on, like on the school grounds, I would stand up for them, because I'd be like, that's not right, and I had no problem standing up for things that I thought were right. But like if a kid flipped me off or something, I had no trouble chasing them down and beating them up. And, so I got a bit of a reputation, right? And most kids didn't like me and actually stayed away from me, right? And it's no wonder. Fear is an issue, just growing up in that fear, just laying in bed, just shaking, just thinking, oh, God, especially when your dad's running around saying, I'm going to kill us all. God would be pleased. We're all from the devil. And because he was schizophrenic, so he was quite often up in the middle of the night going through his episodes, his schizophrenic episodes, right? And it was scary. It was a scary environment for sure. I was talking on the show the other day that I used to sleep with a knife. Pretty much, I remember getting a knife around the age of 8 or 9. I think I was 8 when I got that knife, to be honest with you. And I think the main purpose of it was to protect myself against my parents, right? Because especially my dad, he was always threatening to kill us, right? And my mom was always threatening to kill me. And usually when she was beating me, she'd be like, "I'll kill you," But I really didn't take her serious because she had been saying it forever. And so after a few meetings and hearing that a few times, I really just, figured that she was just blowing smoke, right? And even though the beatings could have killed me because she was such a powerful woman that, especially a couple of them actually could have killed me, broke my neck or whatever, but mainly the beatings were just beatings and with a belt or her fist or whatever. But the thing is, she would be in the meantime, I'll kill you, you bitch, and calling me names and slapping me around. And so I didn't take her serious because she hadn't killed me yet. So I figured, well, one of these days, one of those blows might kill me, but I don't think she's going to intentionally kill me. But my dad really, I was concerned about that my whole life. And, even, all the way through my young years into my teen years was concerned that my dad would kill us all, not just me, but kill the family. Because he was always talking about killing us. So whenever my dad would try to give me something to eat or something to drink, he'd be like, here, come on, have some of this, right? And he'd be trying to give me NyQuil and stuff, right? And I wasn't even sick or didn't even have a cold, and he's trying to feed NyQuil down my throat, pushing it on me. I'm like, no, get away from me with that, because I thought he was going to poison me. I seriously thought my dad was going to poison us, right, because he was always talking about killing us, and he used to try to kill himself by running down the freeway, sometimes naked. And another time he tried to drive me and my sister over a cliff. Then my mom wouldn't let me and my sister get in the car with him by ourselves anymore, thank God, because it was a bad scene. It wasn't a good thing when you actually were. I didn't like to be with my dad without anybody around, right? Like my dad was a scary man, and he was horrific, right? As much as my mom was my main abuser, we wanted to keep my mom alive because my dad was completely psychotic, and we figured our chances were so much better with our mom than with our dad, right? Because our mom was at least, I don't know, she was horrible, but she wasn't necessarily going to flip over the edge and kill us all, right? Whereas our dad, we were all concerned about that because he was really extremely out of control and crazy. And people say, was he really out of control? Well, he was psychotic. I mean, the man was seeing visions of demons and the devil, and still does today. He has all kinds of issues with, feeling like the demons are out to get him. And in the middle of the night, he'll be crying out, the devil's getting me, oh, he should have been on medication. So he had a chance and an opportunity when they got busted and brought up on child abuse charges to get some help. See, both my parents were diagnosed at the time when they were brought up on charges, child abuse charges. They were diagnosed, and they were told to get help for their mental issues. They were told to get help for their emotional problems. They were told to get help for their past abuse that they both suffered as children. They were told to get help for their marital problems and for their anger management problems and their abusiveness towards their children. They were told to get help, right? Did they get help? No. That's the whole issue. They just didn't want to. No, my dad wanted to continue to live in his psychosis, right? And because he's very mentally ill, poor guy. And people could say, how could you say poor guy after he's done what he's done to you and your family? It's because if he would have gotten help before he was married to my mother, let's say, back in the 40s, he would have got some help, and there would have been something that would have helped him out, some sort of treatment or some sort of pill that would just have straightened him out, then my dad would have been an awesome person, because his main problem is he's schizophrenic, right? When he's behaving himself, he's perfectly fine, right? But when he's not behaving himself, you don't want to be in the same room with him. And that's the problem. He's a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, or whatever, right? And that's why, it's just very scary to be around him because you don't know what he's going to do, right? And that's why even today I really try to avoid him at all costs, right? And not only that, but he's toxic. So when he's having his little psychosis, moments, he's toxic. Talking about how much he hated his wife, and his wife was a whore, and she was a harlot and sleeping around. And of course, my mom never slept around on him, not at all. And I know this, and the reason I know this is because my mom used to cry and cry and cry when I was growing up, because my dad would call her a whore and say that she'd been sleeping with all the neighbors and everybody else, and that none of us were his kids. That was his excuse. He didn't have to take any responsibility for it, right? Oh, none of you are my kids. You all belong to the postman, the milkman, because back then they did have milkmen, right? The neighbor next door, right? Like my mom was sleeping around with all these people, and none of us were his kids, right? My dad was just, he was sick, right? My mom would be crying, and she's like, I have never slept around on any, and there's my dad slapping her around, and it just makes me sick. And then my brothers would get involved, and they'd be like, you leave mom alone, and then my dad'd be punching them out. Then I'd be like, you leave my brothers alone, and I'd be punching me out. It was absolutely stupid. And I was actually really surprised that one of my brothers actually didn't kill my dad, to be honest with you. There was a couple of my brothers, actually, really one in mind, who I thought would who would eventually stand up and say enough is enough and kill my dad, right? He was such a bad man, right? And that brother of mine was killed at the age of 19, right? And he's the one that I figured would, because he was always trying to protect my mom. He was trying to protect everybody. He was trying to protect my brother Rob against my dad, because my brother Rob was the one that my dad used to love to beat on, right? Every chance he got. He'd call him names and beat on him and just treat him horribly, and I think he was sexually using him as well. And my brother Chess was always trying to stand up for him. He was a year older, and I think he kind of felt close to him and, would try to protect him. But my brother Chess was killed at the age of 19 and murdered. I don't know. They called it just killed, right? They weren't sure whether it was murder or whether it was, foul play or not. The FBI finally closed the case, right? Because they couldn't. There was witnesses. There was people to say they knew who did it. One person actually thought that the police were going to think that they did it, and went and killed themselves driving their car over a cliff in the mountains. So there was a lot of weird stuff going on with that whole case with my brother's death, right? But that person, it turns out that most people said no, it wasn't him, and that he was just paranoid that he was going to be that they thought it was him. So who knows what was going on there? All I know is for years I thought it was my dad. I thought it was my dad that killed my brother, because my dad, when he got home from he was one of the last people to see my brother alive. See, so the police were investigating him, and I thought it was my dad for sure, because he was just sitting on the couch, just paranoid and freaked out, and he was not taking a shower for like 2 weeks, and he was just sitting in the couch in a daze, like in a haze, in a fog or whatever. And the neighbor lady finally came over, a friend of my mom's came over and actually helped my mom get my dad into the shower and stuff, because my dad was just sitting on the couch like a zombie for like, I don't know, maybe not 2 weeks, but it was a long time. Could be a week or so, a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, I don't know. All I know it was a long time, because it was some serious thought that my dad might be not ever coming back out of that, you know what I mean, because he had gone in somewhere inside of himself, but he was just shaking, and I thought, I bet you he murdered my brother, right? That was what was going on in the back of my mind, because somebody hit my brother on the side of the head with a rock, right, and with a big rock, and that's what killed him instantly, right? And I thought, I bet you that was my dad. I bet you anything. Then I thought, no, maybe it was my brother, right? Now, how, it's sad that you would think your own family members would kill another family member, but family members do kill each other, right? You bet they do. You start looking around in the news. You start looking around at the headlines coming out. People kill their own children all the time, right? Which is very sad, sick, and twisted, but they do, and especially small babies, right? But generally you don't hear too much about family members who kill their adult or young teenage kids. They do, though, right? It's very sad. I don't know who killed my brother, but somebody did, and they may never see justice on this earth, but I think they're going to face a judgment. So that's the thing. I'm comfortable with that. And for years I used to say I'm going to kill whoever killed my brother, because I was 7 years old, going on 8 years old when my brother was killed. And I remember going to the funeral, and I remember thinking afterwards, I thought, I'm going to kill whoever killed my brother. And I made a pact, I swore to God. I said, God, in front of God, I swear I'm going to find that person and I'm going to kill them. So, and then I was thinking, well, if it's my dad, I don't care. Whoever killed my brother is going to die, right? That was in my thoughts for many, many years, until I finally realized when I got older, pretty much around 18, 19, 20 years old, that I was just able to kind of let it go. So I carried that around for 10 years, a lot of anger and issues with that, because I pretty much thought that my dad did it. Do I have any proof? No, the FBI couldn't even gather enough proof. The whole issue is there was people at the party that my brother was at after he left the party, he was killed, that said that they know who killed my brother, but they weren't saying for reasons of security and safety for the family, right? So it could have been like a mob hit. We don't know. My brother had been doing, he had done some time in the pen prior to that for forgery, right? So I think he might have narked somebody out or something. That was one of the thoughts that was going around. So anyway, it was just absolutely horrific. So then I kind of stopped, blaming my dad, even because I, sort of thinking it was my dad. I never did blame my dad, but I always thought in the back of my mind, I wondered if it was my dad. But I think my dad was just paranoid because he was brought up on abuse charges. See, my dad was brought up on child abuse charges, and he was one of the last people to see my brother alive. So the FBI was grilling him big time, and I think that's why he was so paranoid, because he probably thought, oh God, they're going to think I did it, because he had been beating on his sons, beating on his wife, beating on his children. Treating them horrifically, right? And I think he probably felt guilty and thought, oh God, they're going to think I did it. And I wouldn't doubt that that's not what happened there. But I really was questioning it, because my dad was always talking about killing us, right? So when your dad's always talking about killing you, killing all the family, it's almost just inevitable that you would think that it could be your dad that killed your brother, right? It's not something that, if he had never ever said, oh, I love my family and I would never hurt my family and I would never kill my family, well, then you wouldn't even suspect your dad, right? But when your dad's walking around saying, I'm going to kill you, you bastard, and I should kill us all, that God would be happy, we're all from the devil, and this sort of stuff. Well, of course, in your mind, you're thinking, oh my God, I wonder if my dad killed him, because he's murderous, right? And my mom was murderous too. The two of them were just a bunch of, I'm not going to say it, but it's absolutely ridiculous. And here they had so much support, and they had so many opportunities to get help, and they had so many people that loved them dearly, right? Because they used to like to play cards and hang out. My mom smoked, and she liked to hang out and play cards, and she could be real fun outside of the family, right? It's just that when they all got back home, when we all got back home, the crap started again, right? Our life started again. Like if we were out, except for stores and stuff, my parents still behaved the same way at stores and stuff like that. But if we went to somebody's home, my mom, before we would go, she would say, okay, now listen to this. Everybody's going to listen to this. We're going to have no one talking about what's going on here in the home. We're going to have no one arguing and fighting. We're going to go over there. We're going to put smiles on our face. We're going to have a good time, and we're going to enjoy ourselves, right? After, just possibly being beaten or yelled at, screamed at, cursed at, and then we're going to all put on a smile face, right? And we're all going to go over there straight and pretend that everything's great, right? And that's what we did. We did that for years and years and years. It's the same with my mom after she would beat me and send me to school, right? Sometimes I just didn't want to go to school because I'd just be bruised and welts and whatnot, and she'd just be like, you're going to put a smile on your face and you're going to school. And I'd be like, well, I don't want to go to school. What am I going to tell them about this? And she would say, I don't care. Tell them I hit you. I don't care. And tell them I'll hit you again, right? That was her big thing, right? And it used to bother me because I'd be like, what? I have to put on a smile face for the world when I don't want to smile? I'd be walking to school, just thinking to myself, I got to face this whole day, you know what I mean, with this fake thing on my face, because I'm not happy, right? But that's just manipulation, right? And that's what a lot of abusive parents and people do, right? So it's absolutely harsh. It's absolutely harsh. In the meantime, to the world you put on a smile, and then behind the scenes, it's not a smile, right? And that's what, you learn to do that long enough, you continue to do that in your adult life, right? So things could be going completely downhill and wrong, and it's like, oh no, it's okay, I'm still smiling, it's all right, when actually what's going on inside of my heart is really not okay and not all right. And that's what our parents did to us by doing that, right? They made us, I guess because they just wanted to continue to abuse us, and they thought, well, we'll just continue to do what we're doing. We'll abuse our children, but we'll make them smile, and we'll make them toe the line out in public, and that way, we can continue to get away with what we do here. Nobody will know what we're doing to our children, and then we can keep doing it, right? Because they had already been busted and brought up on charges. They certainly didn't want any more charges laid against them, and any more charges would have just brought, we would have been removed from the home. That's all there is to it. So it's absolutely ridiculous, that no child should ever go through that. So we'll bring this back up tomorrow morning. We'll talk about the rest of this stuff, humiliation, and children being at risk for experiencing, low self-esteem, depression, drug, alcohol dependence, increased potential for child abuse as a parent, right? So we'll pick this back up tomorrow. I'll be back on tonight on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio if you're interested in joining me over there for half an hour at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can just type in Dreamcatchers under the search button here on Blog Talk Radio and bring it up. Thanks everybody for being here. I really appreciate it. Make sure that you get some help, right? If you've suffered with this and you're on your own, and you just think, oh, I can't cope. How am I going to cope? There are ways that we can cope. And there are things that we can do to help ourselves, right? And so if you're having a hard time and you just, not doing well, you reach out to somebody. I don't care who it is, even if it's group support because you don't trust a counselor or therapist, or if you don't want group support, call a therapist, call a counselor, or whatever you have to do. But make sure you do reach out. If you have to call a crisis line, then call a crisis line, because you deserve so much better, and you certainly deserve to have a good life, right? I know that I do, and none of my family deserved what they got. But that's the past. Can't change that. But what I can change is today. I can change the way I feel about myself every day and today, and that's what I'm doing. So that's the whole issue, right? And I'm changing the way that I felt about things, right, so that I can learn to heal and move on. So make sure that you do get some help, right? Don't suffer in sadness and silence. It's horrible. And have a good day, everybody, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow, same time, same place, 6 o'clock a.m. And if you need something, you can leave me a message here on Blog Talk Radio or Facebook or whatnot. I'll be around. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.